Hey everybody, I'm Aaron Marcus. I am so excited about today's Audition Secrets workshop. And there's a lot of information I want to be getting through today. And I also have a lot of questions. So I want to make sure that I have enough time to get through it. I will get through all of the questions that people have sent in. And so basically people will send in questions, either they can't attend live, or they just don't want to, bother asking questions during the workshop. So the important thing is make sure that when you're watching the workshop or watching the recording, that you go all the way through, including all the questions, because there's some really, really good questions and some important information you'll be learning just from the great questions that came in. Okay, so let me get going here. The very first thing that I want to get started with is, let's take things from the very beginning. You get contacted, by an agent. Maybe you found an audition on your own. And the first thing you need to do is find out, what is the project? And there's a lot of times you really don't get a whole lot of information if you're finding it on your own. But if you are contacted by an agent, they should be able to give you some pretty specific details. And it's really important that you ask. Certainly, is it a TV show? I mean, once again, hopefully they're going to give you that information right off the bat, but sometimes they don't. So you want to get all these details. What kind of project is it? TV? Is it commercial? Is it a film? Is it an independent film? A training film? You also need to find out very quickly, what are the audition dates and what are the shoot dates. Now, sometimes what can happen is let's say you're already booked out for the audition date. And, that could be for a variety of reasons. Maybe you have a booking that day. Maybe you've got a job that you just can't take off on that particular date. Maybe you're going to be on vacation, whatever the reason is. Here's what I would suggest doing. Don't just immediately think, well, I can't audition for this because I'm not available for the audition date. Tell your agent, that you aren't available to audition on that particular date, but then ask if you can come in for callbacks, if they're having callbacks. And sometimes the agents will do that. They will at least ask. Now, the agents don't have control over that, but at least the agent can ask, and they can say, look, so-and-so isn't available for the audition, but I'd like to ask if you would see them during callbacks. And that's after the first round of auditions. And, it's not unusual to see people auditioning for the very first time during callbacks. Another reason for asking about the project is because you just want to make sure it's something you're comfortable with. You want to make sure it's not a product that you don't want to be a part of. If it's a commercial, you want to make sure, let's say it's a political spot, or some kind of commercial that you don't want to support, or whatever it is. Look, I know people who will not do ads for cigarettes, for alcohol, for lotteries, for meat, anything that deals with eating meat or leather. I mean, there are millions of different things that you might not want to be associated with. So the important thing is, tell your agent then and there. I mean, you don't want to be in a situation where you go to the audition, you book the job, and then you tell the agent, look, I'm a strict vegetarian, this is for a fast food restaurant, I was thinking about it, I just don't want to do it. Because that makes you look very unprofessional. It also is really bad for the agent, because it makes the agent look bad, and it might hurt the agent's reputation with some of the casting directors. And I can tell you that sometimes agents are not thrilled when you say no to an audition. Maybe you've been requested, and now the job might go to another talent with another agent, and the agent's going to lose out on the percentage. And look, I'm sorry about that, and I'm sure that feels bad, but this is your life. These are your beliefs. You need to stand up for whatever you believe in and say no. Thank the agent very much. I really appreciate it, but say no. And I've turned down a couple things in my life, not that many, and And they were all business decisions, and I'll share them with you very quickly. I'll tell you about one of them. One of them was a great ad campaign. It was a national ad campaign, and it dealt with child abuse. And the whole concept of this ad was, normally you think of a child abuser as being a very scary, evil, frightening looking person. Well, the sad reality is you've got to be really careful out there, because even a nice, friendly guy like me could be a child abuser. And I thought it was a great campaign. I was hoping it would be very successful. I think it's important for people to hear that message. I just didn't want to be the face of a child abuser. Besides the fact at that time my kids were kind of young, and I didn't want their friends to be thinking, boy, Jeremy and Jen's daddy, so it seems like such a nice guy. I can't believe, he's beating him and stuff. The other thing too is, aside from that, even if you don't have children, it was a business decision because I was concerned. If I am, nationally known for being a child abuser, even though, most industry professionals are going to get it, I'm an actor, still companies might not hire me, even though they know I'm not, really a child abuser, but, they wouldn't want to use my face for, Toys R Us ads or Parents Magazine, and things like that. So anyhow, that's an important decision you make right off the bat. Let your agent know. Okay, so if you find out that it's a TV audition, this is for a TV series, here are some of the steps you absolutely need to take. You've got to watch the show. And look, fortunately, in today's time period, even if you don't, have things like HBO or Showtime or Netflix, and that's where the shows are being aired, there are many ways that you can at least get some clips from the show, whether it's going to YouTube or even renting a DVD of the series. There are many ways of doing that, but it's crucial that you watch the show, watch a number of episodes. Not only do you want to know who the key actors are, and I'm not talking about what their names are, I'm just talking about the characters on the show. You need to know who these people are. You also have to be very familiar with the pacing of the show. What's the dialogue like? Like, for instance, many years ago, there was a TV show that my daughter loved watching called Gilmore Girls. And if you ever saw it, you'll know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't seen it, people talk very quickly on the show. People would go back and forth, and they would just talk like this. And this is just how they talk. This is what it was all about. So knowing that, if you were auditioning for that show and you went into the audition and you were just reading the sides, and just to make sure sides is the short portion of the script that you are reading for the audition. And they use that term for both film and TV. For commercials, it's copy. So the point is, if you know what the pacing of the show is like, what kind of show, is it a sitcom, is it a drama, it will give you a much, much better idea of how you're going to be auditioning with those sides. If you are auditioning for a film, here's what you need to ask. You need to ask your agent, or once again, if you're getting this on your own, see if you can find out who is directing the film. The reason why that's so important is because every director has their own style. They have their own way of making things look, making things sound. And once again, let me give you a real life experience and example. This is a number of years ago as well, and I auditioned for a film that was written and directed by M. Night Shyamalan. And he's the guy who did The Sixth Sense, The Village, Lady in the Water. He's done a lot of things. So I was very familiar with his style. And when I went in to read for a part, it was very clear to me exactly how this character needed to come across. Everything is very secretive. Everything is done very calmly. You say a tremendous amount with your eyes. Even more so than normal. Very little movement is going on. And I know a lot of those things are pretty basic acting techniques for film and TV, but even more so for his projects. There are always little spins into things. And once again, I mean, I was given the sides. And on a little bit of a side note, uh, and this is pretty typical, especially for films, but it happens for TV all the time as well. There's something called an NDA, non-disclosure agreement, that you will need to sign. And basically, it's a legal document saying you're not going to talk about the project. You're not going to talk about the audition. Sometimes you will even be told you are not allowed to even say that you auditioned for the project. They just don't want any information going out. And absolutely, you've got to, besides the fact that it's a legal document, you've got to abide by it. I mean, like for instance, I just shot 2 episodes of House of Cards, and it's going to be the first 2 episodes of season 4, which will start in February of 2016. That's what I've been told. And you know, I can't say anything about it. I mean, because it would ruin ruin a lot of the excitement that is going to be taking place, you know, on the show, and details of what's going on. So you really have to abide by that. The point that I was getting back to with M. Night Shyamalan was because I also knew that a lot of times, at least he's got like these spiritual things and twists. I made some decisions about my character that wasn't written into the sides. I just made a decision. And what's really important when you are auditioning is that don't play things safe. And what I mean by that is sometimes, you know, you're not 100% sure what you need to be doing because you don't have all the information as to what else is going on in this project. You know, what happens in the next 10 pages? What happens to your character? And so you've got to make decisions on your own. And here's the key thing. Take a stand. You know, whether it's right or wrong, in many ways, it doesn't matter. Because number one, what they're looking for is, the first thing is, do you physically look right for the part? I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. That's probably the most important part of your audition. If you physically don't look right for the part, if you're not a movie star or, you know, star on TV shows, chances are you're not going to get the job anyway. But aside from that, you know, they want to see somebody who can make the character come to life, who can make the words sound conversational, you know, who, you know, reacts in an interesting way with the other actors. That's what they're looking for. And they understand you don't have the luxury of being able to read the entire script and make decisions based on that. So what's most important is you make a decision on your own, whether it's right or wrong. And the good thing is, even if you took your character in the wrong direction, if they liked your read, they'll bring you back for a callback. And once again, let me give you a real life situation. And this is a number of years ago. There was a TV show on NBC called Homicide: Life on the Street. And to make a very long story short, I got called in to read for the membership director of a really fancy country club. Personally, I didn't think it was really right for me. I don't think I really looked like that kind of person, but apparently the casting director did. And so you know, I was going to do it. So the short version is a number of my members are getting murdered. And the membership director is getting interviewed by the homicide detectives. And essentially what's happening is I'm talking about these members who, you know, who were just murdered, and you know, what would be the normal thing to do? You know, this person is either in tears or almost in tears. It's very sad. You know, I've known these people for, you know, all my life. They, you know, they came into the club with their parents, and, you know, I've seen them grow up, that kind of stuff. So I decided, look, that's the normal way to do it. And I didn't want to do it the normal way. I wanted to do something that was a little bit more interesting. And so I started thinking, and this is what I'll do sometimes, what's the opposite way to read it? Well, the opposite way to read it is, you know, nonchalant, doesn't really make any difference, maybe even a little laughter. Of course, you're not going to read it that way. That would be inappropriate. So what I wind up doing is I try to find something somewhere in the middle, but something that's interesting. So what I decided to do was I'm thinking, okay, I'm a membership director. I'm a money guy. I'm, taking care of membership here. I got to bring in members. And the fact of the matter is, and I hate to sound so cold about this, I just lost income from, a number of members here, which, look, I'm very sad that they were murdered. I mean, it's horrible, but I'm really looking at the bottom line. That's how I'm thinking. I'm a numbers guy. So that's how I read it. And I read it ice cold. Basically, I knew Mr. Smith, very nice man. Is there anything else here, officer? Because I've got a lot of work to do. That's how I did it. And I walked out and I thought, you know what? I thought it was a really interesting read. Once again, I didn't think I was really right for the part. And then I got a call back. And this is the interesting thing. And that's why it's a good example, because even though I read it in a way that they wouldn't want it read during the filming, it grabbed their attention. And the director said to me, he goes, I got to tell you, you're the only one who took it in that direction. He said, do me a favor, read it again. This time, why don't you show a little blood flowing through your veins? And so what I did was I backed it off a little bit, and I did show some of the empathy that I had for these people who've been murdered. I still did keep it, though, a little bit cold, because that's who I am. I'm a numbers guy. So those are the ways you want to be thinking. And so getting back to the M. Night Shyamalan audition, I did get a call back. He liked what I did. And I did not wind up getting the part. But the point is, it was all based on the fact that I was familiar with his films. I made some very specific decisions that actually I had these powers. There was nothing written in the sides, but I was able to foresee things. I was able to read people's minds. I had this whole thing worked out in my head. And so that's the way you want to be, viewing all of these directors' films that you're going to see. And look, you don't have to go out and buy them. Just go to imdb.com. It's Internet Movie Database. It's free. You can go on there free. You can also pay to have your information there, but you can go there and access it free. Look up the director, see the films that this director has done, and then once again, just go to YouTube. You don't have to go out and buy them. Just see little clips of this director's work, and it will really help prepare you tremendously when you're going for your audition. Now, let's say it's a TV commercial or a radio spot. So, the director, you're not going to be researching that. There are no, characters, stars on the shows. This is all you. This is all brand new stuff here. So what you're going to be doing is, certainly as a way of preparing, you're going to read the copy. Make sure that you are familiar with all the words. And sometimes I know we feel a little dumb, especially if you don't get the copy until you walk in to the casting director's office. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes you get things ahead of time. But and by the way, if you are in a situation where you are not getting the copy until you show up, always get there early. I just had an audition and I wasn't able to get the sides until I got there. I got there about 45, 50 minutes early, just so I could sit and play with it. And I've done this as well. So I've gone in, and if there are any words that I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce, I will ask. If there's a character and I have any questions at all about how to pronounce the character's name, I will ask the casting director. There have been times, not that many, but there have been times I wasn't 100% sure what the word meant. And I will ask that as well. And sometimes we do feel a little ignorant, or you can feel ignorant. But let me just tell you, you're much better off asking that question and knowing exactly what the word means than to go in, do the audition, use the word incorrectly, and then it just really hurts your audition tremendously. And if it is a TV or radio spot, absolutely, you've got to make 100% sure you know that you are pronouncing the name of the product. Because if you mispronounce the name of the product, you're not going to get the job. Something else that you can do to help prepare. Find out if it's a 30-second spot or a 60-second spot, whether it's radio or TV. I mean, typically, I would say the majority of them are going to be 30-second spots, but there are 60-second spots. So what I do is I have a little stopwatch, and I will start reading the copy. I'll start you know, the little stopwatch is right on my regular watch. And then that will give me a really good indication as to how quick I need to read the copy. So if I'm coming in at 40 seconds, that's telling me I got to pick up the pace. I've got too many gaps in there. So normally I would say that for any TV spot, you probably need about, you know, 2, 3 seconds, somewhere around there. And it will vary of dead time so that if they have an announcer, that announcer can come in and say a couple of things. So normally I try to have my copy end at about, I'd say 25, 26, maybe 26 seconds, maybe 27 seconds. And the same thing for radio as well. Here's another key problem that and mistakes that actors make for television commercials. They feel like, I'm an actor, this is a product, I need to sell it. I mean, that's why they're hiring me, to sell this product. And honestly, it's just the opposite. And that's why TV commercials are its own universe. You audition a little bit differently for TV commercials than other kinds of products or other kinds of media, whether it's film or TV. Your job is not to sell. And if you are trying to sell, you're not doing your job. You're not doing a good audition. The one exception is if you're, you know, a spokesperson, you know, you're the on-camera spokesperson, yeah, then you are selling. But 95% of the time, 98% of the time, these are lifestyle commercials where people are getting an opportunity to learn about the product and how good the product is because it makes people feel good. Just to give you a really quick example. So let's say it's for a soft drink, and the whole ad is showing these people on the beach and all of these beautiful looking people, and they're having you know, a campfire, and everybody's hanging around and having a great time. Well, the whole idea is, you know, when you drink this particular soft drink, it puts you into that category. So they want to see people who are just loving life, enjoying each other, just having a wonderful time. And that's the connection. That's what they want you to connect. When you drink this soft drink, that will make you one of these kinds of people. So you don't want to hit things hard. You don't sell. What they want you to do is, you've got to be thinking of the words, feeling what's going on, sharing your feelings, sharing your emotions, and that's what the camera will grab. The camera will see the activity in your brain, and that is what people will see during the audition, and that's what they want. So just make sure, get rid of the concept that you have to sell. Okay, so let's say you get the sides ahead of time, or even if you have to do this very quickly, you know, when you arrive. It's still, here's some really, really helpful steps for studying the copy or the sides. Now, I've seen people do this, and you definitely do not want to do it. Sometimes people will get the sides, and what they do is they start highlighting their lines, and that's what they study, because they think, okay, I just need to get my lines down, make sure I can read my lines very cleanly, smoothly. Don't do that. Look, I'm not saying don't highlight your lines. Of course, you're going to highlight your lines. It makes it easier to find your lines if you're holding the copy. But you absolutely need to read everything on the page. You have to be very familiar with other people's lines. Part of the reason is that because quite often it's the other person's lines that gives you information about your character. You also want to be looking at any additional information that you see on the sides. So let's say if there are some sides, and in the sides it says on top, you know, Jack is having problems finding a parking space and he's late for work. Okay, well, that's really helpful information. Now, I can tell you one thing that I'll read it, I don't necessarily use it. Sometimes if they say, he laughs here, he smiles here. You know, it depends on my decision, whether I think that's right. I don't necessarily use that as a 100% guide. Um, but anyhow, that's what I do. But if I'm seeing something where this guy's getting frustrated because he's not able to find a parking place and now he's running late, that is crucial information for me. It helps me start the scene prior to my first words happening. Now, the other thing, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that pretty shortly, but the other thing too is, and this is another huge mistake that actors make, they get the sides, they start reading it, and they're acting. They're trying to get into that acting mode, seeing what they can do with the lines. Don't do that. That comes much later. The very first thing that I do for everything, whether it's sides or copy, for a TV spot, I read all of the words like a laundry list. So like, for instance, and by the way, this is just like one of the questions that came in that I'll be responding to. But if this were the copy, on the other hand, I was thinking that my information sheet and resume, that's how I would read things. I'm not trying to act it. I'm not trying to show any emotion. And part of the reason for not starting off with reading it as an actor, it's kind of like with anything that you do. You can start building up certain muscles in your brain that will cause you to start reading things a very specific way. And sometimes it's hard to make adjustments. It's kind of like, and once again, many years ago, I used to be a musician, studied classical guitar in college, and what we would have to do, what my teacher had me do, was instead of picking up new music to study and start trying to play it, they would make me, or she would make me memorize it in my head, and I would see exactly, and I would say it out loud, where the notes were, where my fingers should be, because if you started trying to play the piece right off the bat and you start making mistakes, it's hard to correct it. And the same thing can hold true when you're reading the copy. Go through it very slowly, no emotions whatsoever, and then as you start to build the character, that's when you start adding in the emotional part to it. And also, by not doing it right off the bat, it will make it easier for you to make adjustments if you need to do that. You're also going to be reading this as an audience member, as if you are watching this production in front of you, not as the actor. You'll see things very differently. It takes a lot of the pressure off as well. Some of the other things you want to be looking at is, what's the big picture here? Is this a comedy? Is it dramatic? Is it something that's sad? Certainly what kind of project, just like I mentioned earlier, is this a sitcom? Is it a drama? And also, what's the purpose of the scene? And what I mean by that is, are you getting something new from the scene? What is it? Is there a plot that's starting to happen? Is there just new information about the characters? Those are the kinds of things you want to be thinking about. And also, what is the audience getting out of the scene? And that's really important as well. You also want to ask yourself, what is the purpose of the scene? What is it showing the audience? Like, for instance, and you want to say this to yourself very specifically. This scene, this is your sentence. This scene is to show the audience what, how, or why. And you want to make it very, very specific. And when you break it down like that, it gives you a much better handle on what's going on here. Continuing with studying the copy and the sides. So I mentioned before, any words you can't pronounce, any words you don't understand, and here is something else that is so crucial, and this can be a make it or break it part of your audition. Clearly understand, who is the scene about? If the scene is not about you, don't try to make it about you. Once again, let me give you an example. So I was working, I was helping out a friend, and I was a reader for a film that this guy was directing. And this guy came in to read for the bartender. Now, in this particular scene, the star of this movie is sitting at the bar. And the bartender turns around, says to the star, "What would you like to drink?" So that's the bartender's line. And so to help put this in perspective of all those other things I was just saying, it's showing that the star is having some issues. He's starting to drink a lot. There are so many other things that are going on. But clearly, it's showing something new about this character to the audience. Well, the guy who was reading for the bartender just wasn't thinking in those terms. And he was letting his ego get in the way. Don't ever let your ego get in the way, because you're going to lose the audition. You're never going to book the job. So what he did was he wanted to show the casting director and the director how great he is as an actor, how powerful he is, what strength he has, how much he can emote. Now, remember, you guys heard the line, "What would you like to drink?" That's the guy's line. So the casting director goes, "Okay, action." And he turns to me, the reader, and he looks at me and he goes, "What would you like to drink?" Now, I did everything that I could not to laugh, because, look, I'm being very professional there. I don't want to embarrass the guy. It was so silly, though. Clearly, the scene is not about him. If it's not about you, don't try to make it about you. The way it should have been read, "Hey, what would you like to drink?" That's it. You know, there's really nothing going on in there as far as, big emotions, because it's about the star. You also, as you're studying your copy, you want to learn what is your relationship with the other character. And by the way, I just want to let you know, for those of you who are like scribbling this stuff down like crazy, just so you know, you are going to be getting, it's part of the bonus, you're going to get a copy of this entire PowerPoint. So you'll have all this, and also in one of the bonuses, it also walks you through a lot of this stuff. So don't feel like you've got to write all this stuff down, right now. So what's your relationship with the other character? And what is your role in this relationship? Are you the son with your dad? And what is the relationship? Is it a good relationship? Do you guys battle a lot? Are you angry with him? Is he your best friend? And quite often you'll find this is really helpful. What does the other character reveal about your character? And so quite often, and that's why I was saying you've got to read everybody's lines very carefully, because quite often it's the other character that will give you a tremendous amount of information about you. Here's what I was talking about earlier, where you need to either they have the information in the sides about what's happening prior to the scene starting, and if they don't, you make a decision as to what's happening in your life prior to you saying the very first few words. So you want to come up with a decision. Once again, it might be right, it might be wrong, and honestly, it doesn't matter. What's important is that it's an interesting read, and that, hopefully you will get a callback, and that just means they liked what you did, and now they're calling you back and have you read with the director. And for a callback, that can mean a number of different things. You might just be 2 or 3 people at a callback, 4 people. Different casting directors and directors work things differently. Sometimes you have more than that. And so if you do get a call back, don't start spending the money. That just means they're interested, they like what you did, and now they want to see more. So you make the decision. How does your character physically and mentally enter the first scene before you say your first few words? And that's really important, because that way it will give life to your character right off the bat. When you're looking at the sides, you also want to see, is there some kind of change in the character? Does your character go from being this really sweet, sensitive guy to all of a sudden now he's getting a little bit more obnoxious, or he's getting sarcastic, or he's getting angrier. And if you do see a change, you've got to make a note. Where is that change taking place so that you can mentally and physically get to that place in that area so you know where that takes place. You also want to always give some life to your character after your last words, after the scene ends. And I can tell you this happens a lot for people, especially, well, not especially, but certainly when you're doing home auditions and you say the very last words. So if your last words are, hey, don't walk out on me. Okay, those are your last words, and then people just stop, and that's the end of the audition. The problem with doing that is that if people liked your read and you're grabbing their attention, all of a sudden when you make that abrupt ending like that, it's a little jolting and it's unnerving, and in many ways, I believe, it kind of ruins your audition and it sours it a little bit. So what you always want to do is give yourself 2 or 3 seconds. That's all I'm talking about, to wind down things and really finish things off. So like, for instance, if I was doing the scene, whether it's live or if I was recording at home, and my last line was, hey, don't walk out on me, what I would do is, hey, don't walk out on me. And I would follow the person walking out. Or maybe even say the line, hey, don't walk out on me. Something like that, just to add a couple of more seconds to the character, and then it feels like you're really ending it. And personally, I think it's okay if you need to add a word in there, 2 words just to finalize things. I think that's absolutely fine. Something else with the copy and the sides. There is the main thing when you are auditioning is that you want people to believe that they are watching you in the scene. And so if your scene is taking place outdoors and it's a busy intersection, you want people to believe that they're watching you outside in a very busy intersection. So what you want to do is this. It's called the 5 W's. And you're going to answer those 5 W's. Who, what, where, when, why. And you want to make your answers very, very specific. Who are you talking to? And that's crucial. I mean, hopefully that's going to make it very clear in the sides who you were talking to. What are you talking about? Where is this taking place? And that's what I meant by, if you're talking outside, it's going to sound and look very different than if you are sitting in somebody's kitchen, and they are 3 feet away from you. You probably talk to them like this. If you're shooting the scene and you're walking down 7th Avenue in Manhattan, well, you can't be talking like this to the person because they would never hear you. It's so noisy. So you're going to have to raise your voice up. And for the who part, let me just kind of jump back for 1 second. So I remember once auditioning for the role of a teacher, talking to a class, and actually it was in that film Project Almanac, which I wound up booking. And it was a history class, and I'm talking to the entire class. So for the audition, I'm not just looking at the casting director saying my lines, because for the who, to answer that very specifically, I'm talking to an entire class here of students. So I'm talking like this because I need to reach all the students in the room. Now, I don't want to turn too far over because then it's a profile shot. But, I'm going to really give a good indication here that I'm talking to a class, and I can come back and things like that. So, who, what, where, when? When is this conversation taking place? Is it happening at 3 o'clock in the morning? Is it happening, 12 o'clock in the afternoon? It's going to sound very different. And why? And this holds true, let's say it's a cosmetic company, a cosmetic product that you're selling. And maybe this is something to cover up things on your face. And if you know who you're talking to your best friend. And you've got to be thinking of a real person. You can't just say, like for a TV commercial, well, I'm talking to the audience. I'm talking to people watching, the commercial. There's no emotional tie to that. You need to make it a very specific person in your life. So let's use the example of this is your best friend. And she's very attractive. She has some skincare issues. She wakes up sometimes and she has like little, I don't know, marks on her face. And this product will cover it up. And she is going to love this stuff. So for that last W, the why, you're saying this because you care so much about your friend. And when you do the read, people will feel the emotional part of it. People will feel this person really cares about me because you're talking into the camera for a TV commercial, and people will feel it, and that's what they're looking for. So always do the 5 W's and make it very, very specific when you are answering those. Okay, nervousness. That's another very important part about auditioning. I know that sometimes people will tell you just to get rid of nervousness, don't worry about it. Sometimes people freak out. They think, how am I ever going to actually audition because I feel so scared? And look, it is hard. It's a very difficult thing to deal with. But I have a couple of really good suggestions for you, and something that I personally use, because there are plenty of things that scare me. Like, for instance, when I was auditioning for the TV show House of Cards, I was scared to death. I was really very nervous. I love the show. The actors are phenomenal. I really wanted to book it, and I was scared at the audition. So what I do is this. Number one, I don't get rid of my nervousness. I mean, I don't try to kill it. I don't try to squash it. I don't just focus on it. I acknowledge it. And I'll tell myself, yeah, I'm really scared. And the other thing too is, see, I like being nervous because when I'm nervous, there's a lot of energy flying through my body. And I find that to be very helpful to me. I feel those synapses firing. I feel this energy, and it brings out some life into what I'm doing. Now, the trick is, like with any kind of energy, you have to be able to harness it. And you don't want other people to see it. So I'm not saying get rid of it, contain it, but use it. And one of the things that helps me tremendously when I go to auditions, and it's not every audition I feel nervous about, certain ones I do, that is, I don't go to auditions trying to book the job. Now, I know that sounds a little bit odd for somebody who makes their living, as an actor. So, I mean, I need to book jobs if I want to make a living. But that's not my number one goal. And for me, that helps take some of the pressure off. When I go to an audition, my number one goal is to have a good time. So, like for instance, when I went to the audition for House of Cards, I wanted to enjoy myself. And I wanted to get into the character. I wanted to play. You might be in there for literally 3 minutes, depending on how long the piece is, how many times the casting director will allow you to, do takes, or if they give you some suggestions. But that's my goal, to have a good time. And I think when you stop thinking in terms of, I got to get this, I really want this thing badly, I've got a mortgage due, I've got rent due, I've got to buy groceries, I don't have enough money, this job will put me over, whatever it is, you're adding so much additional stress that will really make things difficult for your audition. Go in there, have your goal by having a good time. That's your number one goal. And just, for my second goal is to learn from the experience. And typically I'll walk out of an audition and I'll think, well, I wish I had done this, 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 and this. Sometimes I walk out and I thought, I did everything I wanted to do. And I have learned, over the past 30 years that doing a great audition quite often has very little to do with booking the job. You can give the greatest audition out of anybody who read that day, and there's a good chance you're still not going to book the job, because it's not a contest as to who's best. It's who fits the role best. And look, you might have given this great read, but maybe you're just a little too attractive for this particular role. Maybe you're not attractive enough. Maybe your body is too good. Maybe your body's not good enough. Maybe you're too tall. Maybe you're too short. Maybe if you are a teenager and you're reading for the children of the parents who are already in this project, great read, but maybe you just don't look like you belong to the parents. So there are so many factors involved, things that are out of your control. That's why I go in there, do the audition, enjoy it. Sometimes I walk out and I think, oh, I blew that one, or it just didn't go well. And that's okay. I'll try to figure out what happened. Look, we're all human. We make mistakes. Some days are going to be better than others. Don't kick yourself. In that moment, you did the best that you could. You did the absolute best that you could. And sometimes it's just not great. And that's okay, as long as you can learn from it and you don't beat yourself up. And you should never do that to yourself. And then the third thing is, if I happen to book the job, that's icing on the cake for me. But that's not my number one goal. So not booking the job, highly recommend that. The other thing too is, you've got to remember, you have already had success just by getting the audition. I took it was a great workshop with a phenomenal casting director who I really respect a lot, and he does a lot of casting on the East Coast, mostly in North Carolina and Louisiana. I know that's not East Coast, but and also Atlanta. Those are like the primary areas. And he was telling me, and actually I'm going to give you some information about larger markets as well. But he was saying in the workshop that typically for any one role that he puts into the breakdowns, there are normally there are 500 people submitting. In LA, I sat in on a workshop with a casting director who does mostly commercials. He was saying for a commercial breakdown, normally he'll get 1,300 submissions. There are a tremendous amount of people who are submitting, either via their agent or on their own. So getting back to the one on the East Coast, out of the 500 submissions, he will have 30, normally I'd say about 30 people come in and read or audition online. And sometimes a little bit more, but typically about 30. And out of those 30, he might call back 3. So by the mere fact that you got a call or email to audition, that's success. Because it's hard. It's hard to get auditions. It's really hard. And just getting the audition alone should make you feel good. And even if you are just submitting on your own, on some website, whether it's 800 Casting or Actors Access or whatever it is, just by getting the audition, you've already succeeded. So, some other things that you can do to help with your nervousness. Along with the mental part of it, I also do some physical exercises if I'm really scared. Now, I don't do this in front of a casting director. I don't do this in front of the other actors. I might do this out in the hallway, in a bathroom, by my car before I walk in. And you might not be able to see the bottom part here, but basically what I do is I put one hand over my heart, one hand over my belly button. And you guys can try this. It's pretty amazing. Take a really deep breath. I'll close my eyes and then just let it out very, very, very slowly. And what I find is that it drops my heart rate. It takes you out of that fight or flight way of thinking. You're not worried about being attacked. Because the other thing also to keep in mind, because I know that sometimes actors have told me they feel like there's this battle with them and the casting director, and they're fighting them. They want to prove how great. Look, the fact is, casting directors want you to be great. Besides the fact that I'm sure a lot of them are very nice people and they're rooting for you, But even if they have no heart, just from a business point of view, business perspective, they want you to do well because it makes them look good to be able to submit great auditions. So they will do what they can to try to help make your audition phenomenal. So when you go in there, you're a partner. And so when I walk into an audition, here's what I have in the back of my mind for every audition. First of all, I walk in, say hello to people. It's kind of like going into a party. Say, oh, hi, how you doing today? And just try to take control a little bit of the party. Look, these people are probably seeing a lot of people throughout the day, and they're feeling pressure themselves. They've got to get this thing done. It might have been a long day for them. And I just walk in with a lot of fresh air and friendliness, and it's like, hey, how you doing today? And the other thing too is, in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking, if I book this job, that's fantastic. If I don't book this job, that's fantastic. I'll get something else. And the reason why I have that little mantra just kind of sitting way, 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 way in the back of my head is because if you walk in there and you are showing any kind of desperation of, I got to get this, I want to impress them, and all that kind of, they can smell that stuff a mile away. And the reality is, they don't want to deal with desperate people. They don't want to work with people who feel like they're on edge. They want people they can trust. They want people they can relax with, people that they could imagine enjoying being with. That's what they want to see. So walk in, with this friendly attitude. And once again, a little bit of a side note, I just thought about this. Shaking hands. Look, there's some unusual people in the industry, and what I've come to learn is I never extend my hand to the casting director, to a reader, to producer, any of those people in the room, unless they extend the hand to me. Some people are kind of germ-phobic people. Some people just don't like being touched. Whatever it is, I'll just walk in, kind of wave, hey, how you doing? Or hi, something like that. But unless they extend their hands, I'll walk in. I always ask ahead of time, do you guys need a headshot and resume? I ask that out in the hallway, and they'll tell me, yes or no. And then if I do have a headshot and resume, I'll just walk in and hand it to somebody. So anyhow, the important thing is just walk in as a human. Walk in like you want and you're ready to have a good time. It helps set the stage. It creates a really nice, warm, friendly atmosphere. And that's what people want to see. The other thing that I might do, and once again, this is done outside, I just might shake out some of that excess energy. I might, kick my legs around a little bit, shrug my shoulders a little. I'm not trying to get rid of the energy, just trying to contain it. And once again, don't let anybody see the nervousness. You walk in there, and internally you might be in knots. Externally, they see somebody who's exuding confidence. That's what they want to see. Okay, so let me go into a couple of really helpful TV commercial techniques. What I always do is, I always think of a word or maybe two words that help me say my first line. Sometimes, actually, let me just go right down to this bottom line here. Let's say your one line in this TV spot is, this coffee maker is so easy to use. Okay, so that just kind of comes in out of nowhere. So what I might be thinking ahead of time is, wow, this coffee maker is really easy to use. Now, I'm not going to say it out loud because it's not written into the script. I don't want, look, people have spent many, 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 many hours perfecting and crafting the copy, especially for a TV commercial. I don't like to play with that. So I'm not going to add in a word at the very beginning. I'll hear it in my head. It's like an internal monologue. And before we start shooting the audition, I might be turned like this, and I might hear the word, wow, this coffee maker is so easy to use. It just gives me a reason, and that's something you want to think about ahead of time. Here's another little trick. Honestly, I don't understand it. I know it works, though. So, and this is for TV commercials, not for film or television shows. if the first line is, this coffee maker is so easy to use, what I always do is I hear that little keyword or two words first in my head, then I start the very beginning of the first word down here. So the word this gets started down here, but I finish the IS part of this right into the camera. So let me show you the difference. So one is, let me just get the line. This coffee maker is so easy to use. Or, this coffee maker is so easy to use. There's something about when you start the beginning of the word down here and then bring it up, it's like you're bringing the person into the conversation. And for TV commercials, that is so important. Okay, let me move on here. Once again, just like with everything else, don't end the commercial with the very last word. So if the last word is so easy to use, don't just stop it right there. It's like, so easy to use. Something, just to finalize it and not have things get cut so short at the very end. You also want to finish the last word into the camera. And look, if you can memorize things, great. If you don't memorize things quickly, or if you just showed up and they just got the copy and it's just not going to get memorized, at least try to do this for a TV commercial. Try to memorize the very first and the very first line and the very last line, and direct those right into the camera. Because typically those are going to be the two most important lines. So if you can get those right into the camera, that would be wonderful. As far as making mistakes, look, we are all human. It's not like an Olympic event where, if you're doing, some kind of, routine and you don't land properly, or you slip, or you fall out of the toboggan, or, you fall down while you're skiing, whatever it is, it's okay to make mistakes. When you're auditioning for, for a film, and, you goof up on a word, it's like, so what? They understand that when you're shooting a scene over and over and over and over and over and over again, you're going to make a mistake, and it doesn't matter because they're doing long shots and close-ups and over your shoulder and over somebody else's shoulder for close-ups. It's okay to make mistakes. Now, it's how you handle the mistakes. That's what's really important. So if you make a mistake, you have a couple of options. And this is what I do. If it's at the very beginning, I'll just start over at the top. I might just say, hey, you know what, I'd like to start over if that's okay. And I don't ask for permission. I also don't demand it. That's typically how I'll do it. Yeah, I just like to start it again if that's okay. And if for some reason they say, no, just keep going, well, I'm going to listen to them. I'm not going to fight with the casting director. But typically that's fine. If it's like towards the end, then I'll just try to pick things up. And by the way, I always have the copy in my hands. And even if I have things memorized, still, I like to have the copy in my hands. So that way, just in case, as I'm doing my lines, all of a sudden I go blank, which, happens sometimes. I can just quickly glance and boom, I'm right back into it. I don't have to stop completely, start filling around in my pockets, or if you don't have the sides on you because you want to show off that you can memorize things quickly. Look, the fact is, you're not getting hired because you can memorize quickly. That doesn't get you the job. So don't think you can walk in there and you don't even have any of the sides with you. That's really impressive. It's not. What's impressive is that if you do get stuck and you can very quickly get out of it, that's impressive. So anyhow, I like to hold the sides with me. It's kind of like my blanket just in case I need it. I think once or twice in my life I was asked not to hold the sides. No, it is true. As a matter of fact, I had an audition pretty recently for an independent film, and just got the copy pretty quickly, and I was very familiar with it. I wasn't 100% word for word. We ran it a couple times, and the casting director said, hey, look, you seem pretty close to it. Don't worry about getting it word for word. Just put the sides down, and let's just do the scene. And that's fine. That's different. But I like having the sides just in case I need it. And once again, it's how you deal with the problem. And you know, if you go in there and you read it and you make some mistakes, but you hang in there and you fight through it, that's great. That's what they want to see. It doesn't have to be perfect. And like I mentioned earlier, honestly, the most important part of the audition is your look, because look, for somebody like me, you know, I'm not going to get, you know, cast typically as the guy, you know, the prison guard. You know, normally you wouldn't think of me as a prison guard. You're not going to think of me as the tough guy. That's just not my look. And it's not to say that as an actor I couldn't get into those kinds of the right emotions, but really, if they're going to hire somebody who is a prison guard, chances are they're never going to look at me. So it doesn't matter how well or how poorly you read. So anyhow, the important thing is, if you make a mistake, just make sure you handle it well. You don't give up, you don't run out of there, and that's what they want to see. And so this is what I had mentioned. You know, I just try to start over. If you have a couple of different ways of reading it, you know, you've got a couple of different ideas that you wanted to play with after you've read it the first time, I would ask, is it okay? I've got another idea. Could I try it this way? And, you know, listen to what they say. Sometimes they'll say fine. Sometimes they say, look, that was fine. Don't worry about it. But if you do ask to read it again, make sure that there really is a different kind of read. Sometimes people basically read the same thing over and over again, even though they've asked, hey, I'd like to try it differently, but it's the exact same thing. And what that really will hurt you, because that's telling people that you're not an actor, that you can't, you know, really make changes. And don't be surprised, especially in a callback, but even for the initial audition. You know, you've studied it, you've made decisions on the character, and then they ask you to do something different. They might ask for a different interpretation, and you've got to listen. You've got to be really focused on what they're saying and make very quick decisions, because sometimes even if they really loved what you did, they still might ask you to read it differently. Not because that's probably going to be the way that you're going to read it on the set. They just want to make sure you can take direction in case that is needed during the actual shooting. How to hold a copy. And that's really, really very important. So let's just say the copy is up here. So I'm going to show you the copy here. And what I like to do is I like to fold everything up so that essentially you don't see anything but whatever is vital information for you. So for me, once again, I am going to do it like this. So this is basically what my copy is going to end up looking like. And you don't want to hold the copy down, which is what a lot of people do, because then what happens is, so somebody reads their line and you're looking down to see where that ends, and then you come back up to read your lines, and then you're looking back down, somebody's reading to you. They want to see your reaction to that reader or the other actor. And if you're buried down here, all they're seeing is your forehead, and that's not going to be a good audition. So what I like to do is I just hold it up to the side, and then here's what I also do. I will grab 3 words at a time. Look at the copy, see 3 words, say it to, you know, whoever I'm supposed to be talking to, grab 3 words. So like, for instance, once again, this is one of the questions that came in, and I'm just going to haven't really looked at this. So I did exactly what they told me to do. You know, aren't you supposed to slate this way? And that's what I did. Grab 3 words, read it, grab 3 words, because that's what things look like when you're having a conversation. I mean, right now I'm looking into the lens of the camera so you can see me, but typically when you're talking to somebody, you'll look at them, you'll look away, you come back, and that's what you'll be doing with checking out the 3 words and then coming back. And this is something you can do on your own. Just go through a newspaper, a magazine, and fold it up, practice grabbing 3 words, and all of a sudden you'll find that you'll start getting really good at that. And it'll be really, really very helpful to you at auditions. I also will use my thumb as a little bit of a guide on the copy. So like, for instance, let me see if you can see this. I'm going to use my index finger, but basically my thumb will be like right here, and then when I'm finished with this line, I'll go down to the next line, go down to the next line, and that way I can just, it helps with my eye line, so when I'm looking at the copy, if I need it, I can see, okay, I'm on this line now, and then I'm on this line. So anyhow, That's what I like to do, and I find that really, really helpful. So for eyeline, where should you be looking? For commercials, you're going to be looking to the lens of the camera. And once again, not to say that you got to sit there and mug the camera. You know, certainly you might be looking away and coming back, but you are going to be looking into the lens of the camera. If it's for film or TV, either it's going to be to a reader who normally is going to be standing or sitting just to the side of the camera, and that's where you're going to be looking. Like, for instance, when I do home auditions, I will have my reader stand or sit right over here. You don't look into the lens of the camera, or you're going to be looking to the other actor. Now, here's a little bit of a tricky thing, with the other actor. If the other actor is standing, way to the side, then sometimes what I have to do is I might have to cheat a little bit, because if I look directly at the actor, then the camera is catching a profile shot, which I don't want. So sometimes I might look over here. I can still see the actor here, but the camera is still able to see a good part of my face. The exceptions to the rule, if you're auditioning for the role of a news reporter or broadcaster for a TV or a film project, then you are going to be going into the lens of the camera, because that's what they do. So anyhow, how to end your audition. When you walk out of there, don't start thanking them. You don't want to finish the audition and say, "Oh, thank you so much for bringing me in. I really appreciate it." Look, you're doing them a favor by allowing them to see your work and to help them cast their project. So really, there's no need to thank them with that. Never apologize. Even though you might have known that you really goofed up at this audition, you want to walk out of there like it was the greatest performance of your life. And you walk out of there with your head held high, you're proud, and the reason for that is sometimes I've walked out and I know that I didn't do a very good job. It just didn't feel right. I felt lost. I was distracted. I didn't understand something. And I booked the job. That stuff happens. And if I had walked out with my head down and just kind of went, "Oh, sorry about that. I know it wasn't very good." And all of a sudden, I'm going to be creating doubts. And because the other thing holds true as well. I might walk out and I think, "Wow, that was a great audition. Did everything I wanted to do." Once again, I know that doesn't have necessarily anything to do with booking the job, but at least, I felt like I did what I wanted to do. It was a good day at work. So anyhow, that is so, so important. And look, and if you did a job that you weren't happy with, when you're by yourself, figure it out. Think about what you could have done differently. And look, if you need to go out and treat yourself to something, whether it's ice cream or buying something or I don't know, whatever you feel like you need to do to make yourself feel better, do that. But please do not kick yourself. Auditions are really hard. In some ways, auditions, I think, are much harder than actually doing the job. You don't get that many opportunities to do the lines. A lot of times you're basing stuff on much smaller amounts of information than you would have if you were given the entire script. There's a lot of pressure. Anyhow, please don't be so hard on yourself. So that is winding up the actual workshop. I do have a bunch of questions, and I know we're running longer than the hour, but my feeling is I want to make sure you get all the information I could possibly give you, and I did promise to answer all the questions that came in. And that's what I'm going to do. So if we're going to run longer, we're going to run longer, and that's fine with me. If you have any questions, like I said, you can either raise your hand and Jonathan will answer them for you, or you can just type them in to the either the chat box or the question box, and Jonathan will read them to you. But let me get started going through the questions here first, and then we'll get to your stuff. So for this particular one, and this one came from Sarah, and once again, I'm just, be honest with you, I'm just making up names because I don't want to mention your name just in case there's something personal in there, and so that way people always feel very free in asking me questions. At the auditions, they ask you to slate just your name, show your hands. I did exactly what they told me to do. Aren't you supposed to also slate your city and your agent? Okay, that's a great question. And I didn't even really touch on slating, but I'm so glad you mentioned this. So for those of you who aren't 100% sure, slating can mean a whole lot of different things. That is how you are identifying yourself at the beginning, normally at the beginning of the audition. Sometimes they do it at the very end. Sometimes you don't slate at all. But Uh, Typically, what you're going to do is you walk in there, and if they ask you to slate, or sometimes I'll ask them, "Do you need me to slate?" And if they say yes, I always ask them, "What do you need in the slate?" And the reason for that is because every slate's different. Sometimes, just like what Sarah wrote in, sometimes it's your name. Sometimes they ask for your hands. I find that's kind of rare for me every once in a while, but typically it's going to be name. Sometimes they'll ask for your name and the state that you live in. Let's say, especially if you're doing a home audition and the project is happening in another state. Sometimes they'll ask for your weight. Sometimes they'll ask for your agent. Sometimes they'll ask for the name of the character who you're reading for. It can be a whole variety of things. So that's why I always ask, do you need me to slate? And if so, what do you need in the slate? And then make sure you give it to them. Also, I noticed that at the end of the audition, they didn't say anything to me. Is that the norm? I mean, how do you know if you did well at the audition? Because otherwise, I just feel like a loser if I'm not booked. So, and I'm so glad you brought this up because this is so important. Here's a crazy thing. There's no scientific proof with this, but let me just tell you from my experience, and I've booked over 1,200 jobs. I find that typically the more gracious, the more flowery the comments are after my audition when they say, "Wow, you were great, that's phenomenal, are you available these dates? I really loved what you did. Finally, somebody brought out, this character." When I hear all that kind of stuff, typically I kiss the job goodbye. Normally, when I finish the audition, and if they say, "All right, thank you very much," or maybe, "Okay, nice job, thank you, see you, next," that's when I walk out and I think, all right, now I feel like I'm in the running. I don't know, maybe people know you're not going to get the job, and that's why they say all these nice things to you. And that's not to say that sometimes people haven't said nice things and I've booked the job, but let me just tell you, it's not an indicator. And so don't expect anything, after the audition. Don't expect to hear anything at all. And that's the norm. And you've got to make decisions on your own. I mean, typically, if you really, really, really bombed and they just thought you were horrible, they might contact your agent and say, "Hey, look, I don't know what's going on here, but this just was not a professional audition." So if you're not hearing that, that's a good sign. But don't worry if you don't hear anything because that's the norm. Don't expect to hear anything. Okay, here's another one. It's from Deb. When and how is it best to ask about the story and if there's any, nudity, disrobing, profanity, especially if you're not given much information in the breakdown. Yeah, you're right. I mean, if you're going online, typically you're not going to get very much information. So when you do get this, and if you do get this through an agent, you can ask your agent. So, do you know what this is about? Maybe the agent will have some information, but it's not unusual for the agent not to have much more information than what might just have been sent out in the breakdowns. Sometimes they will say in the breakdowns, nudity, language, adult language. Actually, I would, let me take that back. Not so much for the adult language, but if there is some nudity, normally that's very clearly stated in there. But if you're just given the sides, look at the words in the sides. And here's the thing. If you're not giving any indication that there's content in there that's going to make you feel uncomfortable, go to the audition. And if you happen to book it, and all of a sudden you're seeing your character or just the film itself has things in it that you don't want to be associated with, even if you booked it, in that case, you can just say, "Hey, look, I had no idea this stuff was going to be in here. I'm just not comfortable doing it. Best of luck to you." And that's what you want to do. This is from Mandy, North Carolina. Any suggestions when the casting director or director says, "Tell us a little bit about yourself"? That's a great question. And I don't find that happening a whole lot for me. Sometimes it does. I do find that happening more for like bigger parts where you're not even auditioning, and you just come in for a meeting because they're interested in talking with you. But let's say, like I said, this has happened to me a few times where I'll walk in and the casting director or the director will say, hey, so tell me a little bit about yourself. Here's what you want to do. You want to plan this out ahead of time for every audition that you have, just in case that is asked of you. And as an actor, you want to make it seem like it's just coming off the top of your head. You might have rehearsed this. You might have written it out. You might have memorized the script. But when you're asked, hey, so tell me a little bit about yourself, you're going to go into it as if it's right off the cuff. Here's what I do. I always think about this possible answer based on my audition, based on the project. Here's a perfect example. Doing a shoot, and the characters, the two main characters, were world travelers, people vacationing. The shots were outdoors. These are outdoors kinds of people. And so just in case they asked, this is what I went in there with. And I made up things a little bit. And they said, so, hey, so tell me a little bit about yourself. I love camping. As a matter of fact, my whole family, we went camping last week, and it was great. It's just so nice, get out of the house, get into the woods, actually turn off cell phones, turn off TVs, and just, look at the stars and sit around a campfire. And that's something I absolutely love doing. And so I based it on that audition. Now, did I really go camping the previous week? No, not at all. Have I gone camping? Yeah, of course. And I do love camping, and I have gone with my family, and actually last year we went camping. But the point is, I geared my answer towards the job. And look, you've got to be really subtle with it. It's not like this was a movie about a camper, somebody who goes out camping, but I just knew it was somebody who was an outdoors kind of person. So if there's something where maybe it's a pharmaceutical, it's exercise, it's health related, I might talk about, well, something I really loved. I love jogging, and I go out jogging a number of times every week, and it just allows me to decompress. And anyhow, that's what I would be doing. So gear it towards whatever your project is, and use your acting skills. Okay, this one's a very long one. So let me try to condense it a little bit. This person went to it was an open call, and this is for a TV show. And for this open call, they had you fill out a form, and in this form it said, are you interested in extra work or only in principal work? And she wasn't really sure, because she was interested in both. Now, at this point, she had only done extra work. She's never done principal work, but she wanted to be considered for lines in this particular project. So let me answer that part first, and then I'll get to the other part of the question. So this is going to be a personal question, for you to really answer. Are you okay with doing extra work? And if so, because I happen to know which TV show it was, for a big TV show like this, somebody who's never had any experience, chances of booking a part with lines, not say it's impossible, not say it will never happen. It's tough, because the actors are Academy Award-winning actors, and of course there are exceptions to the rule, but pretty much if they look at your resume and they don't see any principal work at all, chances are kind of slim that you're going to get called in to read. But who knows? Maybe you've got the perfect look for a certain character. So if you are okay with doing extra work, that's what I would check off. Say you're interested in doing extra. You're okay with doing extra work. Maybe you could add a little note on there just to say, I'm really interested in principal work, but I'm also available to do extra work. And so you might just write a little extra note in there just so they can see that you are interested in both. Now, they did list some of the roles that they were casting for principal roles, and she was saying that none of them fit her category. So anyhow, that's probably what I would do. Just say, you're interested in principal work, and that, but you are available and you would be interested in doing extra work. And Something else, maybe you can see if you can do stand-in work, which is extra work, but it's a much better paid extra job, and you can make a lot more money doing stand-in work, and you can also learn a whole lot by doing stand-in work, where you're standing in for one of the principal actors. Okay, this is from Andy in Texas. This is interesting. So, what are some of the advantages, or are there any advantages to going into an audition at the beginning of the day, middle, or towards the end of the day? And if the auditions are over 3 days, any advantage to going the first, second, or last day? Good question. So, look, maybe there is some scientific proof with this one. Maybe there have been some studies. I tell you what I would always do. I would avoid the middle of the day. I don't want to go right before lunchtime, if possible. I don't want to go right after lunch. People are starved. People are getting cranky. They've watched people a lot. So I don't want to go right around before or after. After lunch, they're tired. They're full. They're probably kind of dizzy from food. So I normally like to go at the beginning of the day. And if that's not possible, I might try to do it at the very end of the day. Now, as far as if it's 3 days, absolutely the first day. And that holds true sometimes for if you're doing home auditions. The reason why I try to submit and send things in as soon as possible is because sometimes, even though it might be, let's say your deadline is for next Wednesday to get your home audition in, your online audition. They might have seen an audition that came in on Monday, and they just went, wow, this is the person. They don't even need to watch the other 2 days. Now, typically they don't say, don't bother, but they've already made a decision. So always try to get in there as soon as you possibly can. Okay, this is from Allie in Pennsylvania. On her resume, there is a title of a film that she did that has 3 X's, XXX. She said, look, it's not a triple-rated movie, but it's part of the title of the film. She said, look, I know this, I might be overthinking this thing, but I'm a little bit concerned that people are going to think that it's an adult film. Should I just take out the XXX part of the title, but then people, if they happen to know the project, they might think that I'm being lazy or I made a mistake. Look, here's the thing. And I completely understand the concern. What I would do is this, though. Look, for one column, and by the way, if you have any questions about creating resumes, in my book, How to Become a Successful Commercial Model, I have a whole page just on this with a sample, and you can just follow it along. But one column, you're going to have the title of the project. In another column, you're going to have either the name of the character and the type of performance. Is it co-starring? Is it starring? Is it guest starring? And so either it's going to be the name of the character if people know it, or you might just describe it. So let's say you are the psychologist in this movie. You are the teacher. And then you put co-starring. And then you'll have the name of the director or the production company, or the, whether it's, NBC or HBO or something like that. That will make it very clear to people that it's not an adult film, and I wouldn't have any concerns about that as long as the rest of the resume, and those other columns are filled out properly. Okay, I've got one more page here from Terry. What are your thoughts about dressing the part for an audition? Great question. Let me tell you, there are 2 different philosophies with this. I'm going to share with you both of them, and then you decide what you want to do. Some people will say, never dress the part. You're going to look too desperate. If you are reading for the role of a doctor, don't wear scrubs. It's insulting to the casting director. They know what doctors look like. Another way of thinking is show them that you are that character. Now, look, if you are supposed to be, a fireman, you don't have to go in there with your hat and your overalls, with an axe, with equipment. I mean, that is a little bit silly. Or even for the doctor, you don't have to have a tongue depressor and a stethoscope around your neck, all that kind of stuff. But, or scrubs and booties on your feet, that kind of stuff on your shoes. But what I like to do is I want to make people think that I am that person. So if I'm a doctor, here's what I do. I will bring a lab coat with me. I'm wearing a suit. I'll take the suit jacket off. I will ask the casting director, is it okay if I put on a lab coat? Because I know when I put on a lab coat, I look like a doctor. And if the casting director says okay, then I'll put it on. If the casting director says no, then I won't put it on and I'll just put my jacket on. So I guess like the best way to answer it, because there is no one right or wrong way to do it, don't dress inappropriately. I mean, that's probably the best thing. But I know personally, I like to bang people over the head with the look. So if I'm a business person, I will ask the agent, what kind of business guy is this? Is this guy wearing a suit? Is he wearing a sports coat and slacks? Is it more informal? Is it, polo shirt, and khakis? And that's how I'll walk in there. So anyhow, that's what I do. From Janelle in Florida, should I memorize lines before an audition? And once again, two different philosophies with this. There are some casting directors for certain projects that will say everything has to be memorized, in which case, well, you got to do that. I don't memorize quickly, so it takes me time. I've heard some managers in LA talk about if their clients, if their actors get the sides a day ahead of time, they expect it memorized. I've heard managers in New York, and I'm not saying it's a New York, LA-based thing. These are just people I've spoken with, who have said they never want their talent to memorize ahead of time, because their philosophy is when you walk in there and everything is memorized, people are going to think this is the best it's going to be. And, you might have gotten the sides pretty, recently. And if you come in there, it's memorized, and they think, okay, it's not going to get any better than this. This is it. But if it's, if you know it really well, but you have the sides and you periodically glance, if you need to, and then finish your lines, that's letting them know that it's a great audition. And imagine how great it's going to be when you're completely off book. So that's typically what I will do. Look, if I can memorize it, I do. Like I said, I still have the sides with me. And if I can't, that's fine too. Because they know I'll have it memorized for the shoot. I'm going to be very fluent with it. It's going to be very smooth. And I'll be talking like this and just grab, some words and then continue with it. So anyhow, that's what I do. It's from Lisa in Jersey. What should I do if a reader is taking the scene in a different direction than I think it should go? That's a good question. So the reader, that's the person that they bring in to read the lines opposite the actor who's auditioning. And it was really neat. I just spoke with a pretty well-known casting director, and I asked her very specifically this question. It's funny that this came up. Now, she does things very differently. And she said that she typically will have the same reader for every audition, and she casts lots of television shows. And this is what she has her reader do, and this is probably unusual, but she says that she has her reader follow the actor. So the reader's not making decisions, the reader is reacting to the actor, which is the best way to do things. Sometimes you might get a reader who feels like he or she is really auditioning for a part with a casting director, and they are trying to take things in a very specific direction and get very emotional with things. And it can be very confusing, because if you are taking the character in a different direction, then you start thinking, well, does this reader have some inside information about what they're looking for that I don't have? Should I follow them? So here's typically what I do. If I feel like there's a reader who's taking me in a very different direction, I'll go with my instincts. And I know that I might look like an actor who's not listening and responding to the other actor real well, but I'd rather do that and give the read in the way that I want to than to let somebody else tell me how I want to do the read. And look, if it gets really out of hand or something, you can always ask afterwards, hey, can we try it again? Because I like to do it in a different kind of way, and just want to see if maybe you could follow me on this one. But once again, you also have to be very, now that I think about it, you also have to be very careful, because you don't want to insult the reader or anything to do with casting. But so maybe strict to that, get that idea out of there. Just do it the way that you think would be best. Unless unless maybe the reader is giving you some information that you think, oh, this is interesting. And once again, these are split-second, decisions here. It's from Haley in Atlanta. What should I do if I'm looking directly at the other actor? The camera can only see my profile. Well, that's exactly what I was talking before. You can kind of cheat a little bit. So instead of going all the way profile, maybe cheat over there just a little bit, and that way the camera can still see you. From Emma in Illinois, and I've got two more after this. Should I slate in character? Well, that's fantastic. What a great question. So once again, two philosophies with this. I'll give you both. I'll tell you what I do. One philosophy, always slate in character. They want to cast that person. So if your character is mean, nasty, arrogant, that's how you walk into the room. That's how you slate your name. And then you go right in there. That's one way of thinking. Another way of thinking is, I want these people to see that I'm an actor. I'm not a one-trick pony. This is not who I am. So what they do is they'll go in, and this is how I do it, slate as myself. Nice, warm, friendly. And also with that slate, it is crucial. Your name is out there clearly if they ask for your name, which I assume they'll at least ask for your name. Show some personality in there. Hi, I'm Aaron Marcus. Something nice, like you are introducing yourself at a party to somebody new. That's what you want to do. Make sure you don't zip through the slate. Hi, I'm Aaron Marcus. And then kind of mumble through it, because then you've lost people for the whole audition. And then what I'll do is, after I do the slate as myself, I'll take a beat, I'll look away, come back in and start the audition in that character. That way they can see the transformation take place. I think that's the best way, because the director wants to make sure they're going to hire an actor. So if changes need to happen, they know that you can actually make those changes. From Lonnie in Texas, is it okay to use a prop during an audition, like a cell phone or holding a cup of coffee? My suggestion is never, 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 never use props, or even mime the props. I mean, sometimes people will, hold a cell phone, like this, or they'll hold, a bowl of cereal, in their hand. The reason why you don't want to do that is because, as somebody who sat in on some auditions, actually quite a few, if you're holding a cell phone, whether it's like this or you're talking on the phone like this, I immediately start watching that imaginary phone. And now I'm curious, what's going to happen with that phone? And as you're talking in that phone, all of a sudden, when you start, more of the dialogue and you start talking like this, all of a sudden I think, well, what just happened to that phone? You had the phone, you just throw that phone across the room, and now you've lost me. I'm not following your audition at all. Look, people understand. You know how to hold a cell phone. You know how to use a cell phone if you need one. Don't do that. So if I'm talking on the phone to somebody, this is how I'm talking. I'm not holding anything up by my ear. Any special hints for like a TV spot if you have to drink something? Yeah. Actually, that's a great one. That's from Jen in Colorado. So here's one of the tricks, and there are a lot of things, but one of them is when you are supposed to be drinking, and sometimes they'll give you actually, something to drink, or even if you're not holding something, but you are drinking and then you are responding to it, make sure you swallow whatever was supposed to go into your mouth. The same thing holds true with chewing food. You're taking a bite of something and it smells good. You can just smell this great taste, and you're eating it. And you want to swallow it too, but especially with drinking. Make sure that you drink, because otherwise people are going to start wondering, wait a minute, the person just took a drink of something and there's still in his mouth, but the person's talking pretty normal. And once again, those are the little things that are distracting. Just like, if there's a scene you're supposed to hug somebody, well, you're not going to walk over and hug the reader. And I can also tell you, and I mentioned this in one of my video blogs, if you're doing a scene with another actor and you're supposed to have some kind of physical contact, whether it's holding hands or putting your arm around, something that I've learned from one bad experience that will never happen to me again, because it was really very uncomfortable, what kind of shocked me, I always ask the other actor. So if there's a woman playing my wife and we're supposed to be in love with each other, I'll ask her, hey, during the audition, is it okay if I hold your hand? Is it okay if I put my arm around your waist? Can I put my arm around your shoulder? Is it okay if I kiss you on the cheek if it feels right in here? And she says, well, I'm not really sure, which has never happened to me. I will abide by that. And she says, no, no, of course, that's fine. That's great. Because the one time where I didn't ask and I was just holding the woman's hand and she just got very uncomfortable, kind of yanked her hand away. Uh, I learned from that, I always ask. So anyhow, that's what I wanted to share with you in this workshop. Make sure that you prepare. You guys know exactly how to go about preparing. You know how to deal with nervousness. You know how to deal with walking into the audition, techniques to use during the audition, how to end the audition, what to do when you're walking out of there. This was really a great day. Jonathan, I wanted to ask you if there were any other questions that came in at the last minute. Uh,
You've only got
uh,
one, Aaron. They wanted you to review the memorization techniques.
okay, so for memorization, I mean, and that's, I've done like whole workshops on that. So let me break it down for you in a pretty condensed version, and then we'll wind things up. Look, there are many different ways that people memorize, and everybody has different ways that works better for them. So just like with everything that I'm talking about here, there is no one specific way that has to be done. It's not this one thing that everybody does. Look, I study with a lot of different people and I pick and choose different aspects of what I learn and pick and choose the ones that I feel are right for me. So here are some things that you can do. I like to handwrite my lines. Now I might write down the other person's lines as well, but physically writing things out I find really helps me a lot. Certainly repeating things is really very helpful to me. I also want to make sure that when I'm memorizing and I'm saying the lines, I hear the lines in my head that are said prior to it, and then I say my lines. I also like to move locations. I mean, I'm sitting in my home office right now. Sometimes when I do lines, I walk into another room. Sometimes I walk outside. I might be in a store. I find a place where I don't look like a crazy person and start doing lines, because you'll find you might have your lines memorized in your home and then you walk into the casting director's office and all of a sudden you just kind of go blank. So that is really helpful as well. I've never tried this, but I'll just share it with you because I know some people that have done it and they find it really helpful. They will actually record their lines and then play them on a little recorder as they're going to sleep. I don't know, so they seem to feel that it helps get ingrained in your brain. Something else that I will do, and I can just do this on my laptop or you can do this on any computer as long as there's a built-in mic. I will read and record the other person's lines, then I'll hear my lines in my head, then say the other person's lines, hear the lines in my head, and I will go through all of that. Then I'll play it back. And in the playback, I hear the person's line, the other person's lines, and then I can say it because there's a blank space that I left because I was hearing it in my head. That's another way that I find really helpful. And if you can get somebody else to actually read opposite you, that's also wonderful. Here's one other thing, this will be the last thing I mention, that I also find helpful, especially if I find some of the words are a little bit tricky or a little bit tough for me, or it's a tough sentence, and I'm not sure why this works, maybe from being a musician, or maybe this is be great for everybody. I will sing the lines, my lines. There's something about, maybe it's kind of like when you hear a song over and over again and you're singing it, it just kind of comes to you. There's something magical for me as well if I just start singing my lines. Melody doesn't make any difference, and I find that to be extremely helpful also. And just like a little bit of a side note, if we're talking about not just sides for an audition, but if we're talking about like a script, typically what I do, and once again, everybody does it differently, for a script, and I have like lots of lines, what I'll do is I will sit there and count out all my lines, go through everything, count them out, and I don't even necessarily do full sentences. I'm just talking about there's beginning of a sentence, and then the sentence doesn't end here, but the word ends here, and then there's another continuation of it, and I actually count lines. So I'm just making up a number. Let's say there are 50 lines, 100 lines. Doesn't mean 100 sentences. Then what I'll do is I'll think, okay, I've got 10 days to memorize this. And I always want to make sure I've got at least 2 or 3 days prior to the shoot where I have everything memorized. And I'll just figure it out. Okay, I've got to memorize 5 lines a day, 10 lines a day, whatever it is. So the very first day, I go, line 1 through 5, memorize that. Next day, start at the beginning, do those first 5 lines. It'll probably be a little rusty, but I'll get it. Then I do the next 5 lines. Day 3, come back in, start the first 5 lines, second 5 lines. Now I'm starting my third, brand new line. And that's what I do. And I just kind of organize it that way. And like I said, I always build in a number of days ahead of time just in case something happens, I can't get to it that day, or I'm struggling one day with, whatever it is. But I don't know, for me, having like a real plan and a real system is good for me. But that's if we're talking about an entire script. So anyhow, I hope that part was helpful to you about memorization as well. This was a great day. I loved giving this workshop. I love sharing this information with you. Just so you know, if you have follow-up questions, you can always go to me either at facebook.com/howtomodel. You can also email me at Aaron, Aaron, at howtomodel.com. Actually, a lot of this contact information is right there. And feel free, if you have a follow-up question, I'm more than happy to try to answer it for you. Just as you know, I also do private online mentoring. I have mentoring programs, and you can just go to howtomodel.com/coaching, and you can read about those programs where we work one-on-one online. And also, I know some of you are season pass members, but if you're not a season pass member yet, it's a great program. Not only do you get a 70% discount off of all of the workshops, you get $1,600 worth of materials free. We have monthly meetup sessions online where we talk about various aspects of the industry. I answer all your questions. It's really, really incredible. And you can simply go to howtomodel.com, and in the upper right-hand corner, there's information about the Season Pass program. And you also will have access to every workshop throughout 2015. And since you purchased this workshop, you will find that you will be able to go back and see every other one and also every future one. But I can give you, just send me an email too. I can give you some more information about it. Next month, it's going to be great. I'm really looking forward. I've already started working on it, and I'll be sending you some information about it as well. I'm Aaron Marcus, and this was so much fun. Thank you so much for joining me today, and can't wait to talk with you again soon.